This is a Hipsters of the Coast podcast. This Doomed Travelers podcast is brought to you by Hipsters of the Coast, your destination for magic news, strategy, and entertainment. And by Casthaven, where you can build your magic collection like a pro. Visit casthaven.com for more information.
All right, welcome. Welcome to another episode of Doomed Travelers, the podcast where we talk about magic and play Destiny. This week, we're going to be talking about Magic Origins spoilers. This is the first official week of spoilers, but also last week there were plenty of preview spoilers, so we're going to dive into those. And in the meantime, Dave and I are going to try to crush the Prison of Elders on level 32. Joining me this week is Dave McCoy and Brendan B. McNamara. I'm your host, Rich Stein, who just died. Killed by a minotaur. And we're going to dive right in. So, Brendan, why don't you start us off? We got a ton of spoilers already. Looking at the list on Mythic Spoiler, there's just a ton of them. Does anything stand out to you as more exciting?
Well, the Planeswalkers are definitely the most exciting cards that I've seen. Flip cards are so much fun. And I guess these are the only flip cards, or not flip cards, transform cards, double-faced cards, whatever they want to call them. I think these are the only ones that are in the set. And we've got a full cycle, and some of them look really cool. The new Gideon, or Kithion as he goes by during his time on Theros, is a Savannah Lions. He's a 1-mana white 2/1.
Yeah.
Except, not only is he a Savannah Lions, you could spend 2 and a white to make him indestructible till end of turn, which, you know, is good. If that were all that he did, that would be good. You know, it would be a very playable card in the sense that you could play it early, you could attack, and then you could keep him around to make further attacks and make it pointless to block him later in the game. But it becomes even more important because each of these legendary creatures, you know, are embodying the spark of the Planeswalker as they ignite and become a Planeswalker. And the trigger for Gideon is that if you attack with him and 2 other attacking creatures at the end of combat, then you flip him. And so gaining the indestructible is a good way to keep him from dying on that turn.
Yeah.
You can attack with him and 2 others, spend the 3 mana to make him indestructible, and then regardless of anything else that happens, as long as you declared him and 2 other attackers, he's going to flip. And the flip version is it has a lot of similarities to the original Gideon Jura from Zendikar. He has the ability to make a creature. You can only make 1 creature attack him, but instead of all of them.
Which is fair, because it was that ability was pretty good. But go on.
Yeah, and he can't kill tapped creatures anymore, but he can make one of your creatures indestructible and untap it. So that's another way for him to defend himself. It's a little weird because you make him indestructible and untap. So if you do it before combat, so that your creature is indestructible when it attacks, then it won't get to untap afterwards. But it lasts until your next turn, so you could basically make any one of your creatures be an indestructible blocker to prevent Gideon from getting attacked. And he has the 0 loyalty ultimate of he becomes a 4/4 indestructible creature that doesn't take damage. Which, I mean, if you want a 1-mana Planeswalker, this is the closest we're ever going to get. And
yeah, it is, I think, essentially a 1-mana Planeswalker, and the double-face cards are all pretty exciting. Even the checklist looked pretty exciting. I don't know if you guys caught that today, but it was on one of the spoilers today.
Yeah, if we learned anything from Innistrad, save those.
Yeah, especially I think they're going to be, I'd imagine they're going to be fairly uncommon. for this set because there's a lot of tokens. Dave, which spoilers were you most interested in or excited by that came out?
I could pretend to have looked at the spoiler, or I could just say that the planeswalkers are the only things that I've seen out of the set. So, I honestly, when they revealed the Liana, like, I was convinced that this idea would work. And I think after having seen all 5 of them spoiled officially and unofficially, I think it's pretty easy to say that they nailed these planeswalkers.
Yeah.
Gideon speaks the most to me because you attack with him and he basically has a battalion, become a planeswalker.
Right.
And can't complain about that. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the planeswalkers are super exciting, and as a Johnny player, Johnny of the Johnny, not a Johnny the planeswalker, but Johnny of the Spike Johnny Timmy demographic. I'm a huge fan of like Nissa. I think the potential with Nissa to try to get her up to 7 is pretty sweet, and there's just so many cool things you can do with Jace as well if you want to try to mill out your opponent with Jace. I suppose you can try to do that. But they definitely, the double face thing, just seems so obvious. And when they announced that the set was going to feature stories for planeswalkers, I think there was kind of this expectation that everyone had that it was going to be double-faced, right? Like how better to do it. And it's funny to read Mark Rosewater's article today and learn what their kind of original ideas were around the planeswalkers. And in case you guys missed it, the idea was that there were going to be 3 cards. There was going to be a legendary creature, and there was going to be a planeswalker, and these were going to be 2 separate cards. And then there was going to be some card that somehow represented the spark igniting. And that they were kind of struggling with that, like how to represent that, maybe a spell. But then Sean Main, the lead designer, had the idea of using double-faced cards, went to Mark Rosewater, was like, is this something we can actually do? And Mark Rosewater was like, yeah, this is exactly what we would want to use them for. And you're right, they really knocked these out of the park. All 5 of them are great. I think from a constructed power level, of course, some of them aren't going to be fantastic, but for the most part, they're all really flavorful. That's for sure. They really capture the spirit of what's going on here. But for my money, I am really interested in some of the black cards, some of the black rares that have been spoiled, namely the demon Kothafed, who's a 6/6 flying demon that has, whenever a permanent is put into an opponent's graveyard, you lose a life and draw a card. He's a 6/6 flyer.
It's not a May ability.
No, it's a mandatory.
I don't think it is. I'm sorry, I'm reading it in Italian, but
yeah, it has to go for the graveyard from play. So like you couldn't mill your opponent out and then draw.
Yeah. It's I think it's got a lot of interesting applications for blue-black control. Kind of in a similar way, it reminds me of a different sort of what was the Sphinx, the Scry Sphinx. Whenever it hit, you'd scry 3.
Oh, yeah, Prognostic Sphinx.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of that. It also reminds me of the one that let you draw 2 cards whenever your opponent drew a card. Consecrated Sphinx. Basically, these are the kinds of big flying dudes that traditional control decks want to use to end games. So I'm looking, and it's also an interesting combo enabler as well for those of you who are fans of Commander. I'm sure you can think of a million ways to abuse that sort of effect. So I'll let you
just
all.
make sure you don't die.
Yeah,
I could see someone making like 30 tokens or something, and then having a sack outlet and just sacrificing all their tokens, and the player that has caught the Fed has to draw 30 cards and lose 30 life. Or
Oh
something.
yeah, I wonder if you'll see people. I'm sure you will. I'm sure somebody's going to try to donate it to an opponent and then sack all their stuff to kill their opponent. But the other black spell I want to touch upon is Languish. And Languish is 2 black, 2 colorless sorcery. All creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. And the flavor text is pretty good. It's the flavor text is life is such a fragile thing. And that's pretty interesting. But this is
apparently your hopes for a Damnation reprint are also pretty fresh.
This is it. This is it, people. This is as close as you're getting. This is Wizards telling you this is as close as you're getting. This Damnation's never coming back to standard. I think that's a safe bet. I would bet money on that if somebody would offer odds. Damnation's never coming back to standard. Will they reprint it eventually in a Modern Master set? I think a lot of people are certainly holding out hope for that, but it's still not a guarantee, that's for sure. But this is more in the mutilate vein of black removal, killing wave, mutilate, massacre. This is gone are the days of Damnation and Plague Wind. I don't think we're going to get that sort of mass removal like white gets in black. Black's still going to get the best spot removal, kill target creature spells, and it's going to get this kind of infest removal spells, mass removal. But I think the days of Damnation and Plague Wind effects are over.
I mean, Damnation was a color-shifted card, right? So it was not intended to be Black's true space in the color pie.
It is
a potential
allowed. But I think Damnation is one of the color-shifted cards that's more reasonable in the sense of it fitting within Black's color pie. But they clearly are not looking to give Black unconditional wraths. I mean, they also just printed Crux of Fate at 5 mana, which
exactly
sort of does the same thing.
I think Crux of Fate has accomplishes a very similar effect. 5 mana makes more sense. I think obviously the problem with Damnation is not entirely what it does as much as it is the mana cost that it does it at. 4 mana is simply too cheap.
It's very oppressive to aggressive strategy. Trying to swarm the board.
I mean, 4 mana is almost too cheap to get that effect out of white, right? And white's the color of mass removal in that form. So, Supreme Verdict needed a blue splash, and Day of Judgment lets creatures regenerate. And so I think you're really looking at development saying that kind of effect is going to be 5 mana or more, or up. But I like the kind of super infest, right? Because infest was 2 black, a colorless, and it gave all creatures -2/-2, and let you scry. And this is 1 more mana. You lose the scry ability, but you gain -4/-4 instead of -2/-2. So it's
and Drown in Sorrow is the current reprint of Infest.
Right, thank you.
Although it costs
So,
1 black or something.
Yeah. So I mean, those are pretty interesting, and I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of color pie. The color pie stuff is very much in line with the modern color pie definitions, right? So that's a good thing. So
Yeah,
because it is, yeah.
One interesting thing about this languish spell is because it gives -4/-4. One of the color pie shifts that they've done recently is they've moved black into more emphasizing high toughness.
Yeah.
And I could think of 2 black creatures that you might want to kill that have 5 toughness. One of them is named Tassiger, and another one is named Siege Rhino.
Oh yeah.
And both of those will survive this languish.
Do you think Languish has a home in Abzan in mid-range decks, or is it more of a control deck card, or do you think everyone's going to play it?
I think that a control deck, or kind of like these mid-range control-y Abzan decks, can use it, especially if they are playing Siege Rhinos and Tassigers and creatures that survive it. It does take care of Wingmate Rock and all of its tokens, and it would be really good against the Abzan aggro decks. If you can eliminate a Fleecemane Lion that is monstrous, and it would be very hard to have a Rakshasa Death Dealer or an Anafenza or a number of these other early aggressive creatures. It can probably take out Warden of the First Tree until it gets gigantic.
Right.
So it definitely seems like decks that don't want to die early to aggression will play it. And it's cheap enough that you could play it against the red decks and just completely ruin them.
For sure.
It might be a little awkward in, like, if you were just a totally blue-black control deck, you might rather just play some Crux of Fates, and then maybe you have a couple dragons to survive the Crux of Fates, as opposed to this -4/-4 that won't necessarily kill things that you need to kill.
Right.
But it will kill. Killing Fleecemane Lion for the next couple months that's relevant will be very welcome, because that's a sort of card that once it goes monstrous, a lot of decks just can't deal with it.
Right. So this is kind of a development. So this card is clearly, solving some developmental issues. With the format. How do you guys feel about the 2 new mechanics? The Spell Mastery, which is it's a not necessarily a trigger, but like a
ferocious or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a better deal if you have 2 instants or sorceries in your graveyard.
If you have, exactly. So like there's a shock that only hits creatures, so it's 2 damage. But if you have, sorry, I'm getting killed again. If you have 2 sorceries or instants, it does 3 damage. Some get an extra effect, like you can counter a spell, and then if you have mastery, you scry. So that sort of thing. Do you think that's? I think it's an interesting way to show growth, right, of a planeswalker. I don't think there's been anything terribly impressive spoiled with that mechanic, though. And of course, the other new mechanic is this Renown mechanic, and I'm looking for the white card that does. So, Knight of the Pilgrim's Road, a white and 2 colorless. And it's a 3/2 creature. It's a human knight, and what it does is it has Renown 1. So what that means is when it deals combat damage to a player, if it's not already renowned, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it and becomes renowned. So it becomes a 4/3 and is considered renowned. So both of these mechanics are meant to show growth in you, I guess, as a planeswalker,
and improve your SAT scores.
And yeah, Renown is a good one. You guys think
spelling,
these are,
so you don't put a K in it?
I feel like these are both pretty good mechanics for a core set. We don't usually get new mechanics in core sets.
Yeah, I mean, Renown is a pretty sweet white version of Bloodthirst.
Yeah.
It's a nice white take on it. I appreciate it. I think it's pretty sweet that they made a mechanic specifically for this set, and that it fits the idea of growth, just like the stories behind the Planeswalkers and the Planeswalker cards do the same.
Right.
It's pretty sweet. They've done a very good job.
Do you how quickly do you think, Brendan, you're going to find yourself in a limited game that somebody is going to lose because they forgot that spell mastery was about to trigger?
Yeah, it's definitely it's spell mastery is a tricky mechanic because it requires you to track something that you wouldn't normally track, which is the number of instants or sorceries in an opponent's graveyard.
Right.
So it does add a little bit of complexity. Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of ways to really interact with that. You're not playing like Cremate or something. Like maybe they have 2 instants in their graveyard, and then you exile one of them in response to them casting the spell, and then they only get the smaller effect. Those things will come up in Modern if any of these spell mastery cards come up. Because Scavenging Ooze is a card.
Sure.
And people already have that sort of complex interactions. There's definitely some room for some trickiness with spell mastery, but it looks like the effects they have aren't that game breaking. I mean, there's like a fireball, or I can't remember what the X red spell that's always existed. It's an instant that could hit a creature like volcanic something or other, but now there's a new one. Let me see if I can find the name of it. It is X red. It does X damage to target creature, and if you have spell mastery, it also does it to the controller.
Right.
So that is a way that you could potentially not realize your opponent could do 6 damage to you, suddenly out of nowhere. So it's possible someone will die.
That could be pretty brutal. Especially, I mean, thankfully in Modern, there's no longer cards like Seething Song, and this kind of card probably won't even find its way into like the Pyromancer Ascension decks, right? But that's the kind of place where you in Modern you're going to have spell mastery pretty fast.
So you could just go Desperate Ritual, Ravaging Blaze, which is the name of the spell.
Right.
And, so that takes you up to 6 mana, and then you could do 4.
The nice thing though is that there has to be a target creature.
Yeah.
So, but I think that
it doesn't target the player.
Yeah, I really suspect that from a developmental perspective, there are not going to be any really powerful spell mastery cards. If I'd like to think that development has learned their lesson from things like Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise. Mm-hmm. So I'm not expecting there to be like a card that says draw a card for like a blue. Mm-hmm. Or like a blue and a colorless, and then spell mastery instead draw 2 cards or draw 3 cards. Or I'm hoping they're not going to like toy with a spell mastery ancestral recall.
That seems highly unlikely.
A spell like 1 blue counter target spell. If you have spell mastery, also take an extra turn after this one.
Right, exactly. It seems like they've learned their lesson. But, I guess you can never really put it past them. So hopefully nothing like that. But I do like these mechanics. I think they really do capture the flavor. And that's really what the set's about, is capturing that flavor. And it's the final core set, so they're going to do some special things. And, this is spoiler season's off to an interesting start. About 80 of the cards have been spoiled, so we still have about just under 200 cards left to go, so it's not like we've seen everything. We have seen all 5 Planeswalkers, though, so it makes me wonder what's left. Of course, there's going to be more Mythics.
I think the only Mythic we've seen other than the Planeswalkers is the Avaricious Dragon, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Which looks really sweet. Although it does, I don't think it plays well with the dragons from Dragon's or cons block. So basically, it's 2 red for a 4/4 flying dragon. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand.
Right.
It looks like this is the kind of card you want to put at the top of your curve in like a very aggressive red deck, where you don't really have any more cards left once you play a 4-drop dragon anyway.
Right.
I can only imagine like putting this in a deck with like a bunch of Storm Breath dragons that you then have to discard.
Yeah, and it'll be a tough card for like a blue-black deck that wants to cast Cruxifate and keep its dragons in play.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it dies to Languish. So, it could end up being one of those metagame things where are people playing Cruxifate, or are they playing Languish, or, what removal are you expecting? Because if the metagame ends up being if Languish ends up being a card that gets played, then this dragon, unfortunately, probably won't see a lot of light of day, because you're going to play it, you're going to pitch your whole hand, and then it's going to get languished. And that's pretty lame.
Yeah, you have to discard your hand the turn you play it before you get the chance to draw an extra card from the draw step. So, unless you can bring it in with Ether Vial or something, you're going to run the risk of discarding.
Oh my god, Ether Vial. I don't want to have to be on the other side of that. And to turn Ether Vial avaricious dragon. That'll be pretty brutal. So
there is another really cool red rare that's out that is apparently Chandra's parents.
Oh yeah,
Paya and whatever.
Kieran
Nalar.
Chandra doesn't look anything like her parents, but
oh my god, I don't want to talk about it.
But they look like they're a sweet card.
2/2 for 4. I mean, really, it's a 4/4 for 4 because they're a 2/2 creature, and they come into play with 2 1/1 flying Thopter artifact creatures. So feel free to combo that with Thopter Foundry, I guess. And lets you sacrifice an artifact, which those creatures are, to deal 2 damage to target creature or player. And from those, I mean, limited bomb, obviously.
If nothing else, it's a 2/2 that comes with 2 1/1 flyers that can also turn into 3 mana shocks that you can throw around. And if you have any other garbage artifacts lying around, you can do that too. It's funny because I play Affinity a decent amount in Modern, and at some point I was just trying to think of if there are any other cards out there that like let you sacrifice artifacts to deal damage, and there aren't that many cards in Modern that are just like sacrifice an artifact, deal damage, even if they have a mana cost with it. And this is a new one. I don't think that it's going into the Modern Affinity deck because you're just
unfortunately not.
And you're not going to be able to pay 2 in a red to want to do it. But I'm sure there will be a lot of artifact-based commander decks and casual decks and potentially modern, or not modern, but standard decks.
It'll be interesting to see if there's an Affinity-like constructed deck as well.
Yeah, I mean,
not constructed. I'm sorry, limited deck. Because one of the tidbits that came out today in Mark Rosewater's article about the design of the set was that the 10 planes featured in the set all correlate to a draft archetype. So the design of the set has 10 draft archetypes. And I wonder if one of them will end up being artifact-based in some way. One of them will certainly be Burn. Which will be Regatha for sure. But they're all 2-color combinations. So that's exciting. And it'll be interesting to see. So by this time next week, we'll have probably much more of the spoiler. Pre-release is July 11th, which means by the end of next week, the full set will be spoiled. It'll be a nice July 4th gift for all of us from Wizards. Will be the full spoiler for Magic Origins. And we can dive into what we think the limited format's going to look like. I might even go to the pre-release.
No way.
I might. It's I got nothing else to do.
That's your first step to another GP, though.
Just don't do the midnight pre-release. Unless you like the midnight pre-release, but I went to a midnight pre-release once, and everyone I ever talked to who went to one always regrets it at about 2 a.m.
It's one of those things where I did the midnight pre-release last year for M15. I was actually on vacation with my parents and my fiance, and decided, because I wanted to go to the pre-release, but I also wanted to spend vacation with my family. So I went to a midnight pre-release nearby, and ended up that being a big. It was fun, but it was also a big mistake because I was very tired. But it's the set looks interesting. They haven't released too much information about the pre-release yet. But we will certainly get some more in the near future, I'd imagine. I just got level 33.
Wow.
So that's a good way to end the night. So spoilers, next week I'll be level 33 for Prison of Elders. And we'll be breaking down some more spoilers, and check that out. So, is there a card in the set that'll tell me how to turn the stream off?
Hey Guardians, thanks for tuning in to the Doomed Travelers podcast. You can find more at doomtravelers.com or follow at Doomed Travelers on Twitter for show updates and other nonsense. Make sure to subscribe to Hipsters TV on YouTube for videos of our previous episodes, and don't forget that you can find audio-only versions of the Doomed Travelers podcast on iTunes. For your host, Rich Stein, and Matt the Obliterator Jones, I'm David Bones McCoy. See you next time.
Nothing past William Howard Tuck.